Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm excited to hear your questions. I'm Sharon Wachsler, owner and head trainer of At Your Service Dog Training. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself to get started, and then I'll just take questions. And then at the end, I'll give you some resources and information that you might find helpful as you move forward on this journey. Please keep your mic muted when you're not asking a question or answering a question, just so that there's good audio for everybody. So I am Sharon Wachsler. I'm the owner and head trainer. I started At Your Service Dog Training in 2014, but I started training my own service dogs for myself in 1998. I was severely chronically ill for 18 years. I was much of that time using power mobility, using a wheelchair most of the time, in bed a lot of the time. And I trained 3 service dogs for myself with varying degrees of success during that time. When I started, it was very unusual for people to train their own service dog. Most people had never heard of it. And it's a really different situation now. I was working in disability information and referral before I got sick myself. So this is just like a real passion for me. It sort of aligns with everything in my life that I am interested in and know about. And I'm a certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed, and Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner. Alex Weiss is one of our other trainers. That's Alex down there with a white pit bull on their lap. Alex is our senior trainer. They have been a professional trainer since 2015, and they also have personal experience having trained Hitch as a service dog for many years, and then Hitch was career changed. He just wasn't an appropriate dog for public access, so he was a in-home only service dog. And Alex is also a certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed. And then we have one other trainer who is Eli McCullough, and that's Eli down there in the lower right corner. Eli was a guide dog puppy raiser all growing up, and so has a passion particularly for puppy raising, and then was in my mentorship program. I mentor aspiring and working trainers, and now is training for us in another pet training organization and runs our board and train program. So if we have a dog coming to do board and train with us, Eli has the dog in his home and is training that dog. So that's the team, except for the one other person, Lori DiDonato, who is waving at you right now. She is our office manager. If you email us or call us, or you have questions about scheduling or anything like that, Lori is the one who is going to answer you. So she is essential to everything we do. So that's it. That's the 4 of us. So what we do, we help people with disabilities, or sometimes the families of people with disabilities, to train a service dog for that individual. That can be a psychiatric disability or a physical disability. We will help you find the right dog to train if you don't already have the dog you want to train. If you do have the dog you want to train, we can help you train that dog. We offer both online and on-site or in-person classes and lessons. So our primary group class is the DISC series, Dogs in Service Certification. Those happen online. They're foundational classes starting with Pearl. It's 10 weeks each. We also do private lessons, day training in the Western Massachusetts area, and we do private lessons online as well. That's especially helpful for task training and sometimes other manners issues. And then we also have board and train here in New Salem, Massachusetts. And we are very dedicated to service dog training, but we do occasionally do some other things that sort of relate to that. So we occasionally might do some animal assisted therapy. If you are an occupational therapist or a professor and you want to bring your dog to work to help the people that you work with, or people who want to train their dog as an emotional support animal, or people with physical disabilities, especially who have a pet dog that they want help training with. Since I spent many years being physically disabled, chronically ill, and using a power chair, I have a lot of personal experience with how to adapt training. And then I also do consult on service dog training with professional pet trainers, and I mentor and consult with trainers on service dog training as well, since it's a specialty. So that's what we do. We work with a range of different types of service animals, all types of mobility service animals and psychiatric service animals. I would say more of our clients are looking for psychiatric service dogs than anything else. We also do train hearing dogs, and we've also worked with people with other types of disabilities like traumatic brain injury, various sensory disorders, mobility I will also include in that, POTS. And so those are the main types of service dogs that we're training right now. If you have a question, this is your chance to just type it into the chat if that works for you. If you're not able or prefer not to type in the chat when we're doing the questions, you can just wave at me and unmute. That's also fine. So any aspect of service dog training, whether it's training a dog, finding a trainer, dealing with public access, questions about career change and retirement, that it's all welcome. So go ahead and type your question in if you want to. Nancy is asking, how long is the board and train? The way we do board and train is pretty individualized. So we would get some basic information from you about you and your dog and what you're looking for. Sometimes people are looking for puppy training, puppy raising, which can be a long process. Sometimes people have a really specific training goal, like I want my dog to learn this task, or I need some troubleshooting on this thing that's happening in public access. So it really depends on what your need is, how much you want us to train the dog for you, and how much you want to sort of go back and forth with owner lessons and board and train. Some of it depends where you're located. So we have a lot of clients who are a couple of hours drive away, who the dog come out and stay with us for a week or two. We train with the dog, then the dog goes home for a weekend or a week. Do a transition lesson before when the dog is going home. So the handler, the trainer, is learning what the dog has learned while they were staying with us. And then you get to practice that while your dog is home. And then the dog comes back again and does another week or 2 weeks or whatever. So we really, if it's possible, it's a really great option to do weekends home or 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off kind of thing, because then you are not missing your dog so much, and your dog gets to come to see both places as their home, and it makes it much less stressful for everyone. It's also a great way for you to keep the training going and get it in manageable chunks. But because the dog is being trained really intensively when it's at board and train, the training goes much faster. So we have a number of clients who are doing a combination of our online classes and some owner lessons and board and train. If people are further away, or if they, have restricted mobility and it's hard for them to do as much back and forth, although we do offer pet taxi for people who are within driving distance, then we might do something where the dog comes and stays for much longer at a time. We have a 2-year-old lab that we'd like to train for our son who's on the autism spectrum. Does the son need to be the trainer, or would I need to be the trainer? That's a great question. It really varies. Often when there's a parent training for a child, some of it does depend on the child's age, maturity, and ability to participate in the training. We have a lot of clients who are on the autism spectrum who are fantastic trainers. And then there's some people that it's too stressful, or especially if it involves going into public or being around strangers or sensory overload. So it really would depend on the situation. We would set up a consultation and decide how much makes sense for your son to be involved in training and how much would you be doing the training. But in most cases, the parent, unless we're talking about a teenager or young adult who's really very mature and very able to take charge of the training, in most cases, the parent is doing most of the training, and then we try to transition the training over to involve the child when it is appropriate for them. So we have several families right now where the mom is the primary trainer, and when the dog has achieved a certain amount of training, then we transition it over to the child. And that's true for both children who are young, as well as if it's an adult child who is not able to cue and manage the dog on their own, such as somebody with developmental disabilities. Then you have a triad situation where both the child and the parent are the handler, sort of a team handler for the dog. So I hope that answers your questions. If you have more, you can type them in the chat. Anita says, can a dog be trained to help with visual, physical, and mental disabilities? Should different dogs be trained for each type of disability? That's a great question. It really varies. You can for sure train a dog to do tasks for multiple disabilities. And in fact, some tasks that some people need for different disabilities, the same task can work. So for example, a lot of times it could be useful to have a dog guide you to an exit or to your car or something. And that would be a task that would be helpful potentially for somebody with a visual disability, but it could also be helpful for somebody with PTSD or on the autism spectrum or migraines, who is overwhelmed by sensory input or has suddenly lost as much visual acuity as they usually have. We would want to find out what tasks you need to train the dog for, how the disabilities affect you, and any potential limitations that you're dealing with around the training. And then we would try to come up with a plan that made sense. If the dog is a good fit for all of that, and that's going to really depend. For example, if you want a dog who can help you with stability, suppose you sometimes don't have a good sense of proprioception, like where your body is in space, and you need to be able to put your hand on your dog to orient yourself, you probably need a large dog for that. And if you have a little dog who has been doing great with reminding you to take your medication when they hear a timer go off, that little dog isn't going to be able to maybe do what you need to do if you need mobility support. So it would really depend. And you can train more than one dog, but it's definitely true that training a service dog is a huge undertaking. And so training two would be an even bigger undertaking. So probably what I would recommend if I was working with you would be to get a lot of information about what you needed, what your priorities were, and sort of start training the dog that you have for the things that would be the most useful that the dog is a good match for, and then go from there about whether it made sense to keep going with that dog for everything or whether you would need to get a second dog. Oh, Melissa, I love this question. Do we have to train our dogs to be public access for them to be called service dog? So my third service dog that I was training, who was named Barnum, I was at the time in my house almost all the time. I was able to go out very rarely because I was so ill. And I had him doing so many tasks for me at home. He was going to get my personal care assistance for me. He was picking things up off the floor. He was helping me transfer. He was just doing all of the things. But when I took him in public, because I had been able to do so little public access training with him because I was so sick, he was just a little too stressed. And over time, I decided I'm just going to keep him as my in-home only service dog because he's doing fantastic. And it's just too stressful for me and for him to try to bring him on the rare occasions that I went into public. So at the time, I actually started advocating on this topic of a dog is a service dog if it's providing trained tasks or work to mitigate the impacts of a disability. I don't know what your question is behind your question. I don't know if this is because you live in no pets housing and you need to be able to say he's a service dog to be able to keep him in your housing or something like that. But I often strongly encourage people to train their dogs to do tasks at home because it just can be super helpful for the person and it's great enrichment for the dogs. The dogs love it and you don't have the stress of bringing the dog in public. So you definitely can do that. Does gear shyness or excessive shaking of gear automatically mean that a dog shouldn't be a service dog, or is there a workaround? She has passed CGC, that stands for Canine Good Citizen, and multiple public access tests, but won't stop shaking off when the gear is on. It was identified as not a nervous behavior, but just causing itchiness. She is a chow chow mix. This does happen. It's not common, but it's not unheard of for sure. I've worked with dogs who are great in every way, and they just hate the gear. Whether it means they can't be a service dog depends to some degree on what you need the dog to do, because sometimes you need the dog to wear some type of gear for the tasks that you need. But if you don't need your dog to wear gear for their tasks, like they're not doing any sort of guiding or bracing, they don't need them to carry a pouch, then there are workarounds. One would be a leash sleeve. I don't have one in here with me at the moment, but hopefully you guys know what I mean, or just Google service dog leash sleeve. It's basically just a piece of fabric that you put over your leash that says service dog or service dog in training. It's not ideal because most people don't see it, so you're going to get more public access challenges with that. Some dogs will tolerate a bandana if they won't tolerate like a harness or a vest. So if they tolerate the bandana, you could do bandana and leash sleeve. I also want to mention that a lot of the vests and harnesses and things, the issue is that they're just uncomfortable. They're kind of stiff. A lot of dogs just don't love those. Or if you're using something that's made of leather, I would try something that's nylon. My favorite type of vest is this. This is for my little dog. It's just very light and breathable and non-constricting. It's from the Raspberry Field. I love them. You can get it with pockets or not, and you can get whatever color and size. So some dogs who don't tolerate something that's heavier and stiffer will tolerate this. We're working with a great little dog named Bodie, who's a Labradoodle, and he just doesn't really like gear on him. We have conditioned him to just a walking harness. It's the canine balance harness, and he doesn't like getting it put on, but once it's on, he's good with it, but he doesn't like a vest. And so what we did was we took the service dog in training patch and just put it on a piece of fabric with some Velcro. So when he's in training or working, we put the patch on, and when he's not, we take the patch off. That's been a good workaround for him. So I hope that answers that question. How are group classes structured for virtual, and what is the cost? So maybe I'll come back to that at the end because we're going to talk about our classes, but the classes are very small. It's maximum 4 teams. I'll just say a little bit right now and then I'll come back to it. It's 10 sessions. We cover a lot of things in the classes that you can't necessarily do in an in-person class because you can really focus and absorb information in a way that's difficult, often in a group environment that's noisy and active. So we cover a lot of foundation skills for the handler and trainer, like reading dog body language and adjusting criteria, like some of these very things about like getting your dog comfortable wearing gear, how do you help your dog get comfortable when there's a sound, dealing with things that are happening in the home, like your dog is barking at people walking by the window or things like that, as well as the foundations for public access and for tasks and things like that. But let me say more about the classes in a few minutes. And the cost is, Lori, it's going to be $390, I think, for the 10-week class. Thank you, for Pearl. And that also includes the assessment at the end, along with access to our client portal, which has all of our literally hundreds of tip sheets and training videos. You get that for life, and the homework and a recording of every class. And they're taught live by an instructor, not just a recording that you watch. You get coaching, individual coaching in each class. Amber says, my service dog is a German Shepherd, and she worked great at places like the aquarium. Then one trip to a fair, one of the sheep reached out and grabbed her tail. And since then, she has been nervous around other animals. Any tips to desensitize her and or how to find a farm willing to let me try and desensitize her again? Oh, that's really too bad about the sheep. So I think it's a complex question. One of the questions I would have is how often does this dog need to be around farm animals to work? Is that part of your daily life? So when a dog has a negative experience, one thing that I want to do first is to give them some downtime to recover. I try not to expose them to that trigger again until they have re-regulated. And this is kind of a hard one to answer, not knowing really anything about you and your dog and the training that you've done so far. But we would incorporate things like enrichment, making sure that she's getting opportunities to shed stress by doing things like sniffing and working for food and training, playing and things like that. And then we would try to pick apart what are the pieces of the trigger and see if we can separate them out and counter condition her to them individually. So for example, if you played a recording of sheep bleating in the background and you saw her get tense, then we would probably work a bunch on just the sound of sheep. And then I might say, can you get some wool from a local farmer so she can smell the wool and desensitize her to the smell and things like that. So we try to break those things apart. Is she sensitive now to having her tail handled? Does that need to be dealt with as its own thing? So we would try to identify all the pieces and then train each one really positively with lots of rewards and lots of play. Sometimes I use something called pattern games for building confidence, which are you just teach your dog a pattern game. It could be something like looking up and looking down, or looking left and looking right, or taking 3 steps and getting a treat, or walking in a square. There's 4 buttons and they just go back and forth between them. You create this very predictable pattern, which makes them feel secure because it's predictable. So you would do that at home first where nothing is happening, then you would do it in a low distraction and then high distraction. That's one possible way I would use it. I might also do something called BAT, which is behavior adjustment training, which is something that we do sometimes when dogs are overexcited about other dogs, which is sort of helping the dog learn to use self-soothing behaviors around the trigger. And you would want to start at a really great distance with that. So for sure with the sheep, I would try to keep her as far away from sheep as I could right now while you're implementing stuff, so that emotional association, that negative association isn't getting strengthened. I'm sorry that happened. That's a tough situation. SK says, how does training change if the goal is to have the dog be an in-home service dog? Oh, I love all these questions about in-home service dog. So it's a lot easier because public access training is the hardest part of training a service dog. So if your goal is to have an in-home only service dog, then if I was working with you, the only things I would focus on would be, and I'm assuming you're talking about an adult dog. If you're talking about raising a puppy, then let me know. So if you have a dog who's already like a great pet living in your home with you, if there's any sort of annoying behaviors, if there's anything that isn't working, you would just want to address whatever those are. And then the other thing would just be to train tasks, because you don't need to deal with all of the stuff that goes along with public access training, with the amazing manners and being very unobtrusive and being very quiet and being very comfortable with all manner of things. None of that is needed for an in-home only service dog. So you could just get started with task training. And most task training is really great to do online because you don't need to deal with all the distractions that involve public access training. Trav says, my question is, what would be the best online program for what you offer for a 3-year-old corgi? Did you say you're located in Salem? For anyone who's starting out, whether it's with a puppy or an adult dog, we recommend our Pearl disc class. That's that 10-week foundation training class. It covers a lot on how to train efficiently, how to understand what your dog is telling you with their body language, how to break training down into the pieces that will help your dog succeed. We cover a lot of the basic skills, nose targeting and stay and settle in a particular spot where I want you to settle and, be out of my way when I'm vacuuming. We also cover how does this apply in a public access situation, or how can this be used in task training, sort of learning to read your dog at the same time as you're training them. So that's all done online. I am located in Hadley, Massachusetts, and Alex, our other trainer who does private lessons, is located in Northampton. And then periodically, I also travel to the greater Boston area and do lessons in person there. We also do online private lessons for a number of different things, but especially tasks can be great for online training. Also, if we're working with somebody in the Pearl Disc program and they want some additional training or troubleshooting, we can do that with them in private as well. So usually for anyone getting started, we strongly recommend Pearl Disc. And we'll provide a little more information about that in a minute. Sarah says, do you need to know exactly which skills your service dog needs to learn? How feasible is it to add skills over time as you return to work, community, interaction, etc.? You guys have great questions. No, you don't need to know exactly what skills they need to learn. This is the beautiful thing about training your own service dog. When I was training my own service dogs, I started out not as disabled as I became over time. I got sicker and I lost my voice for a couple of years. I couldn't really talk much, so I needed to train a bunch of things for that. In the beginning, I was more mobile, and then as I lost more mobility, I needed to train different things for that. So that's the great thing, is that if you learn to become a skilled trainer and your dog learns to become a skilled learner, you can add things on as you go, and you need to work with a trainer less over time because you and your dog have already learned so much. So usually I ask people to make a list of all the tasks that they think might be useful. And then if I'm working with them, I would go through the list and I ask people to prioritize the ones that are most important. And then I say, like, these are the ones that are the easiest to train. These are the ones that take longer or more work. These are the priorities. These are less priority. And then we try to pick the ones that are either the low-hanging fruit, the easy ones, or the ones that are the most important, or some combination to start with. And then you might decide at a future date, well, now I need this, my life has changed and now I need this one more, or whatever. So you can totally do that. And the nice thing is dogs can keep learning from their whole life. So if you have the training skills, you can, decide when your dog is 5 or 6 or 8 or whatever, oh, I'm going to train them to do something new. Zanita says, my current dog has been retired due to age. She's 12 and a half years old. I am researching a breed to select a puppy. I am blind in my right eye and have PTSD, migraines, and fibromyalgia. It's going to be really important for you to find the right dog. We do offer pre-adoption consulting and dog search support. I'm really passionate about that. When I first started working with people to train their own service dogs, I discovered very quickly that most of the dogs that most people were bringing to me were not appropriate for the career goals of the handler. And that's why I started offering the pre-adoption consulting and dog search support. When I work with people to find the right dog and they follow my recommendations, our success rate is really high, and it's usually not so high for people who find their own dog. So I would definitely encourage you to work with somebody who can help you. And I'll say this, even if you're a really skilled dog person, like even if you are a professional trainer and you've trained several other service dogs, I wouldn't pick out my own service dog prospect for myself, because you're just not objective when it comes to your own dog. We all have our sort of style, or who you're attracted to in the world, in people, but also in dogs, and that can get in the way of making a choice. So I definitely encourage you to work with somebody. I think, in terms of the PTSD, migraines, and fibromyalgia, if you want the dog to do alerting or responding to episodes, then you would want a dog who's got an interest in nose work. The good thing about scent, when you want a dog to do scenting, is that most dogs have a natural interest in scent, whereas for something like sound alert, some dogs are sound averse. It's pretty rare to find a dog who's smell averse. But you certainly, for example, wouldn't want a brachycephalic dog, like a flat-nosed dog. You want a dog with a normal pointy nose, because if you want them to do any sort of scent-related stuff, and if you want the dog to do any type of guiding or mobility support, you probably want a larger dog. So there's a lot of things that would go into it. We have a webinar on what to look for in a service dog candidate, and that would be a good place to start. Can an individual have an ESA and a service dog if they're doing different activities? Yes. So your ESA stays at home, your service dog goes out in public with you, for example. That could be one scenario. Balance is also an occasional issue. Nancy asks, how long would a smart 2-year-old lab need to become a full service dog? She would need to be able to go to work with my young adult son. So if she's already 2, then at least all the puppy stuff is behind you. And it would depend a lot on how much training you and or your son are putting in. So how quickly she learns. If she's smart, that certainly is very helpful. A smart lab usually learns really fast. Generally speaking, there's a balance between time and money. Usually a trainer is going to be able to train the dog much faster than the owner is, just because we have a much higher skill level, we've got more experience. So if you can have the dog do board and train or do day training or a lot of private lessons, it's going to go faster, but it's going to cost you more. If you really need to do things for as little as money as possible and use books, videos, and group classes, it's going to take longer. If the dog was doing board and train, depending on where the dog's skill level is to start and what tasks were needed, it could be a matter of a few months, or certainly within a year. If you were doing it yourself on your own, it's probably going to take more like a year, maybe 2 years. It's really hard to say without knowing a lot more. I usually don't make any time-related predictions until I've already worked with the dog and the handler, because there's just way too many variables. Amber says, my grandparents own an alpaca farm. Oh, and I like to go to the farm, but I could get away from it. That's really rough, Amber, about the sheep. I mean, that's one of those freak accidents. For now, I would work on other things and then work with a trainer to help get her comfortable around animals again. Lynn says, any tips or ideas on extending the longevity of their working life, like giving them days off, doing enrichment? We started training extensively as a puppy, but took 2 years after she was attacked by 2 dogs. She's doing amazing and working actively now, but obviously we have less time than if she was 2. So it's a great thing to be aware of that. Giving your dog lots of downtime, giving them time to sniff, to cuddle, to do enrichment, days off, all of that is a great idea. Using only positive methods really is very helpful too. In the Pearl class, we go a lot into dog emotions and helping them to be as functional and balanced and non-stressed as possible in your training approach and in your understanding of them. If you don't already have those skills, that would go a long way too, because you'll be able to read her and adjust things. Thank you all for your questions. That was a great crop of questions. Information and resources. If you are considering training a service dog, like I said, finding the right dog is so important. So if you haven't yet watched our free informational video that's on our homepage of our website at yourservicedogtraining.com, it's about 40 minutes. That would be the best place to start, because it talks about what to look for in a candidate dog in really broad strokes. It's really important basic information on what to look for in a dog and the processes of training your own service dog. And then from there, if you decide, oh, I want to go forward with this, then we have a 3-hour recorded webinar that also includes materials like fundraising and how do you speak to a breeder about their puppies and things like that. Or if you decide after watching it, I think I don't want to train my own service dog, I think I want to get a trained service dog from a program. It has tips on how to select a program. So I strongly recommend starting there if you're thinking about training your own service dog. It's a low commitment to start with and a lot of information before you get into getting your own dog and things get a lot more complicated. And then from there, if you watch that and you think, yeah, I really want to do this, I want really good support, then I would meet with you. I would ask you a whole bunch of questions first before we met and get a really good sense of your needs and your lifestyle and what you're looking for in a dog and all sorts of things like that. And then we would talk about what made the most sense for you, a puppy or an adult or a, what type of breed and, and things like that. And then I would help you in the process of finding that dog. So again, I just feel so strongly about this based on my experience personally, as well as working with other folks. So let's see, our DISC program is the Dogs in Service Certification Program. It's a series of courses that's specifically for people who are training a service dog for themselves or a family member. It's a levels program, so it starts with Pearl and then Bronze and then Silver and on up. Pearl is appropriate for dogs as young as 8 weeks old, but we've also had a lot of adult dogs take Pearl and get a ton out of it. So we start with a lot of basic foundation things, and then we also cover a lot on public access and foundations for tasks. There's individual coaching for everyone in every session. It's very hands-on, and the classes are kept very small, so that's how we're able to do that. The 10-week Pearl course includes also at the end an assessment. There's a knowledge assessment and then also a practical assessment of your dog, just performing some of the basic tasks from class. And the lesson plans are geared toward what you need in a real life scenario as you're raising and training a service dog. So we do have 2 Pearl sessions coming up that still have some spaces available in them, and I'll show you those in a second. And then we also do private lessons as well as classes. So, and when you are training with us for longer, if you're in New England, we also do offer some in-person classes for intermediate and advanced things. So the nice thing is that you do get a community. We have a private group just for clients who share pictures and videos of their dogs and ask questions. And it's a great way to connect with other people who are doing what you're doing. We have a client portal, which has over 100 tip sheets and videos. We're adding to it all the time. And you have access to that forevermore. As long as we exist, you get that access. And then there's homework sheets and recordings for every class or lesson. So if you can't make it to one of our disc classes, you still get the recording with all the instructions, and you get to watch everybody train their dog, which a lot of people say is one of the things that's the most helpful. And you get that recording if you do come too. So if you really like to watch the recording over again and get more out of it, you can do that. So these are the next Pearl disc classes, which is our level 1 course coming up. You want to register for Pearl disc, you can go ahead and do that. You don't have to have any previous training experience for those classes. We also have one other entry-level class I wanted to let you guys know about. It's really popular. We're about to run our 4th session of it, and we only just started it 2-3 months ago. It's deep pressure therapy. We have a lot of clients who want this skill. This class is taught by Alex. I think it's a fantastic class. I just love it. It's 7 weeks. It's taught live on Zoom as well with individual coaching, also kept to 4 or 5 teams per class. And it teaches a functional duration deep pressure task in one position, like lying on your chest or on your lap. And it also includes other components if you want them. If you don't want them, you don't have to use them, like a chin rest on your shoulder or on your hand or another body part. Kisses if you want the dog to lick you or your child on their hand or their cheek or wherever. An off cue, which can be really important because some dogs really just love to lay on you, or they don't believe that you're okay. You need to make sure you can ask them to get off and they'll do it. And then it starts some symptom cued behavior. So if you want your dog to respond to your symptoms with deep pressure. Your dog does need to already have some training for this class. So they need to already know a release cue, meaning you say free or release or at ease or whatever, and they know that that means that the task is over. So they need to have a release cue. They need to know to go to mat and lay down. So you can say, go settle, and they will go lie down on a mat and lay there. And what's the other one that I'm missing? Oh, and they need to have at least 30 seconds of downstay for, one treat at the end, meaning not 30 seconds where you're treating them throughout the 30 seconds. If your dog doesn't have those skills, but you really want to take the deep pressure class, you can take Pearl if you wanted that anyway, and that teaches those skills, or you can do some private lessons with Alex or me to just on those specific behaviors to just get ready for deep pressure therapy. So we're happy to help if the prerequisites are an issue. And if you want to start sooner and you don't need individual coaching, you can audit. So if you want to take it for half price but not get any individual coaching, that's also an option. It's just to audit one of the current classes. So we offer private training, like I said, online on Zoom or on site in the Western Mass area, or occasionally when I'm in the greater Boston area. Private training is usually the best for tasks or for advanced manners and public access training. You can also do both, like it's fine to start some task training while you're still working on, manners or public access. There's a lot of tasks that don't require the sort of higher level skills that you might need for public access. So you can either do them sequentially or you can do them at the same time. Depends on how much time and energy you have, how much training stamina your dog has, things like that. Board and train is great for puppy raising and socialization, basic manners, house training, all of that. Public access training, especially if it's hard for you to get out with your dog, it can be really great to have somebody else who can do that and get your dog out in public and training in environments that aren't accessible to you or that are difficult for you. Also for task training, or if there's something that just is complex, difficult for you, and you want somebody else to help with that. If you're a professional trainer, I have a mentorship course I'm happy to speak with you about, and I do consulting with pet trainers on service dog topics. We also have a free ebook on our website that anybody can download on basic info that you need for puppy and basic manners training, and I also do speaking and presenting on service dog training. We have the informational video on the website, which is free. We have information that we post on our Facebook page and on YouTube. We have a video and we have an awesome newsletter. I love our newsletter. So it's every 2 months it comes out, so it will not overwhelm your inbox. So all of that is free, and our blog on our website, free information and resources that you can definitely avail yourself of. So that's it for all of that.
What's the best way to work with someone to determine which classes or training are best, what your dog is ready for?
That's a great question. So what I would recommend, if you haven't already, is to watch the video on our website and then fill out the owned dog intake form, a scoring system for your dog's appropriateness for public access in the video, and that's in the form. So that gives us a little bit of information. We also ask, how old is your dog? And have you worked with trainers before? And are you looking for online or in person? So that gives us like a little bit of a window into what you're looking for. And you can also write in there other questions or concerns that you might have. I think we ask a little bit of information about like what stage is your dog at in training? Are you doing tasks or whatever? So start with that. And then Lori the Magnificent will get back to you and she will ask you some follow-up questions or make some recommendations based on what she sees there. And we're very reachable. So if you have more questions after our initial response, email back and say, okay, but what about this? And we'll help you with that. So that is, I hope that answers that question.
The next one from Lynn, would you recommend private classes if you already have public access training?
It depends on what you're looking for. Like if you're looking for task training and that's it, then usually private classes are great for that. Yeah, I guess I would say drop us a line or fill out the own dog intake form with that basic information about your dog, and then we'll have a little more information and we'll be able to get back in touch and say, oh, we think we should do this class or more advanced class, or you should do lessons with Alex. Would you suggest continued learning while researching and selecting another prospect? It may be 6 to 12 months before I have a new dog. The process of trying to find the right dog can be quite long. So I think starting the process of thinking about what you need now and beginning the researching and the selecting, because you might decide, oh, there's a breeder who's fantastic and I want to get one of her pups, and she might not have a litter for 6 months or a year. So I think it's never too soon to start the process of researching and learning. It can be awesome if you do have an already trained service dog to sort of model for your new pup. Sarah asks, can you register for Pearl and DPT overlapping? Yeah, totally you can. We have people taking more than one class at a time. Unless if your dog doesn't already have those 3 skills that are prerequisites, then you would want to take Pearl first. But since the next DPT is September, you could register for one of the April Pearls now, and then by the time that year the DPT starts, your dog will already have those skills. So I think that would work really well. And those DPT classes do fill, so the chances of that one being filled well in advance are pretty high. It's a good idea if you want to take classes down the line to get on the newsletter email list, because we always put when the next classes are in the newsletter, and then you'll know when they're there. I've heard it's possible to burn out my puppy by training too much while she's little. That is very true. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. How do I avoid burning her out, and what are the signs of burnout? Well, that's definitely something that we talk about a lot in Pearl, because it is so easy to do when you're training a service dog. There's so much excitement and there's so much need sometimes that we do try to do too much too fast with a puppy. So really understanding dog body language and puppy development and how to read your dog's stress signals is a huge component of that. We do a lot of that in Pearl, making sure to give your puppy a lot of downtime, a lot of play, a lot of snuggling, and keep the social pressure really low. And by social pressure, I mean sort of your emotional response and your expectations of the puppy. It's a really hard thing to convey here, just really, really trying to let your puppy just be a puppy and managing your expectations, which is very difficult. It's hard. And that's part of the reason I definitely recommend working with a trainer, because part of our job is to be a reality check and a cheerleader, because it can be very intense to raise a puppy, let alone to train a service dog. So having somebody else who can sort of give you the 1,000-mile perspective can be very helpful. But I love that the fact that you're already thinking about that is just fantastic and really wonderful sign that you're probably going to be a lot less likely to burn out your puppy because you're aware of that. Would being able to help others train their dogs help me in training my own dogs? Oh, that's such an interesting question, Zanita. I mean, I think it's fantastic to learn more dog training skills. If there's a good rewards-based dog trainer in your area, often they like to have people come and assist with classes by just watching classes and putting out water bowls and things. And you could definitely do something like that. I do often, when I do pre-adoption consulting with people, encourage them, if they have a dog in the household already who's not appropriate for service dog training, to train that dog just to improve their training chops. So if you have a friend or family member who you can borrow their dog, that's a great idea. Or audit classes now with us, preparatory to getting a dog. I think that would be fantastic.